Hello, thank you for joining me again. I'm going to tell you about 4 whiskies that I have selected to be my Christmas drams of 2020. And it's been an interesting experience to do this because although it's probably my 5th or 6th selection of whiskies for the Christmas period, I've tried to bring something from each of the original 4 regions. So Campbelltown was added latterly, and fantastic whiskies, but I wanted to stick to 4 drams to tell you about today. So I managed quite unconsciously actually to select 1 whisky from each of the regions, but also I wanted to make them super affordable. So I'm talking about something that's special but affordable. So all these whiskies are around the £50 mark. Did I hear you gasp? To trade up for something you want to share with your friends, I think £50 will still buy you some super whiskies. And the first one that I'm going to tell you about is from the Glasgow distillery. So Glasgow 1770, it's a whisky that I'm very excited about because I actually visited them a long time ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when they were really just starting up. And they are in a warehouse in the back of an industrial estate, and I just didn't expect anything at all going into there. Now the nose on this is incredibly fruity. Yes, it smells young, but it's got some real freshness about it as well. Quite exciting, and shows lots and lots of promise on the nose. So anyway, I went into the distillery and was greeted by a young chap, an Australian, I think, the name of Lachlan stays in my mind. And he was travelling and he knew about distilling, and he'd been taken on by the distillery. And I remember drinking with him some new make spirit in warm milk, and I think he called it a steam tray. It was absolutely sensational. So I'd kind of forgotten about them a little bit, and then my friend Eddie, who is one of my best whiskey chums, had bought their peated version of this. And we were tasting that against the Port Charlotte 10-year-old heavily peated Islay whiskey, which is just a fantastic peated whiskey. But the peated Glasgow, really, okay, it was young, and drinking it straight after the Brook Laddie, gosh, it was a bit disjointed, if you like, but in the mouth, goodness me, it settled down. So I was keen to taste this. Oh, and it's got so much flavour. Apples, I get a bit of bananas and pears in there as well. Big pepper afterwards, big spice on the tongue. So again, I'm excited to see how this matures as the years pass. It's 46%, so obviously that extra ABV does add to the flavour. But it's really mouth-watering. Now, this would be a lowland whisky coming from Glasgow. And traditionally, Scotch lowland whiskies were triple distilled, very much in the Irish style. And of course, long history of Irish in Glasgow. But this one isn't, although the distillery does do a triple distilled. I've not tasted that yet, and I'm excited to do so. But, oh yes, it's so warming, and despite the fact this is not their peated expression, still really mouth-wateringly fruity and fresh at the top, but this big spice at the bottom on the first sip. So second sip, much more joined together, and buttery custardy notes come through with that now. It's an absolutely delightful dram, and it's one that I think guests over the Christmas period will find really easy to buy into. I think even non-whiskey drinkers will enjoy that. With a drop of water. Now obviously it's not my first dram from the bottle, so and I was actually, perhaps I'm nervous about talking to you, actually put 2 or 3 drops of water in there. I actually prefer it without the water, but the water does join it together even more, and it makes it immensely drinkable. So it's a cracking whiskey, that. It's £49 a bottle, but it is only a 50 centilitre bottle. So maybe that puts it into the rather more expensive end of my tasting. But I cannot recommend it highly enough to you. And also, what's exciting about this is, as with a whole raft of other new distilleries that were opened at about the same time, it's just going to be so exciting to see how they develop. I'm well, almost beside myself. So, the next 2, yes, the bottles look the same. Now, these both come from the Gordon and MacPhail Discovery range, which are carefully packaged in coloured tubes to make it easy to select whether you like a fruitier style of whiskey or a more sherried style of whiskey. The other one is a sort of grey silver, which is the peaty style. So the first one that I'm going for is from Tomartin, and this is a 10-year-old, well, bottled in 2019, filled in 2008 into casks. So I did get my maths A level on the 4th attempt. Even I can tell that that is 11 years between going to cask, but then are we splitting hairs? It could indeed have been 10. Anyway, enough of that. Tomartin, we're electric car drivers living in Orkney, really green place. You may have heard me say before, one of the big things about Tomartin as you drive up the A9 is it has an EV charger. They are becoming more common, but it was a big reason for going there. If you come up to Scotland on the night sleeper, then you will probably find their 12-year-old on board, and it's a lovely dram to go to sleep with. But in terms of Highland whiskies, what do I think about Highland whiskies? I love them. They're outdoorsy, but they've got a touch of finesse, and all very different characters, from just people who like being outdoors to rugged mountaineers. You know, you can find the whole gamut of flavours in Highland whiskies. But I have a really soft spot for Tomartin, and this is probably the 3rd bottle of this that I've bought. Since the range was launched probably 18 months ago, maybe just a little bit longer. Again, a very fresh and fruity nose. And even lighter and brighter actually than the Glasgow, which is interesting considering the ages. And green apples, vanilla, pepper but better balanced, maybe sort of slightly more all-spicy than the pepper in the Glasgow, slightly more grown up, slightly more challenging. Again, really mouth-watering. Touch of toffee apple, honestly. It's years since I've had a toffee apple. What would I know about toffee apples? Except they're difficult to eat with any sort of elegance. But there is all of that there, but great vanilla. And it's just so fruity. It's that whole sort of top fruit thing that you get with American oak, and I just love it. Is it a winter whiskey? I don't know. You see, some people just drink the same thing year in, year out, don't they? I always remember one of my whiskey women, when I ran a whiskey dining club, said that her husband was given countless bottles of whiskey, but actually all he ever drank was grouse. You know, you can get into a rut with your whiskey drinking. And I think you can about summer and winter whiskies too, and that's one of the great things about living in Orkney. You can get all 4 seasons in one day. Yeah, I would have this whisky in my barrel all year round because I just love it. And here it would be just fantastic with fish and smoked fish, fresh fish, butter sauces, all that sort of thing. But equally so, you could have it with a bread and butter pudding, or what else? Custard puddings, creme caramel, you name it. You really could. I think it's just lovely. But I would caution you, dear viewer, about water, because I think it is so well balanced as a whisky that the water in it is just superfluous. It kind of brings out more tart tartany, caramelized, sugary notes in it, which of course you may find deeply appealing. But I think for me it makes it slightly too sweet and hits back on the lovely top fruit, the lovely green apples in it. 43% ABV, and the whole range of Gordon and MacPhail Discovery coming at $49.95. So not cheap, but worth it, really worth it, and a great way of discovering whiskies. And I do remember doing a Twitter tasting with these whiskies, and honestly everybody was unequivocal in their praise of them. Whiskey bloggers from all around the world were just falling over themselves with their praise for the range. So I think Tomartin is a distillery which isn't terribly well known, and if you find another Tomartin disciple, you'll probably be friends for life, but they should be better known, and I just think that's a corker. So staying with the range, we're now heading to Speyside, and this one, when we did that Twitter tasting, was just out there. It sold out almost instantly. And this is from Speyside. You can just tell by the colour it's heavily sherried, and that's what the purple band on the bottles and indeed in the outer sleeves means. And this is from a very, I think, little known discovery. Well, it is a little known discovery, a little known distillery, Milton Duff. So you won't be at all surprised to know that there is a huge sherry nose on this. And it's all about Lexia raisins and Christmas cake and all those sort of things that you think of at this time of year, but which can be overdone and become utterly overwhelming. But there's a lovely balance with this as well. I get some real sort of tannins with it, but also the almondy marzipan-y type rich flavours. Have you ever had a Christmas cake which is glacé fruits and then it's sort of got marzipan and more glacé fruits on the top? Liberally laced with sherry. That's what this tastes of. And of course the affinity is there. I don't know, we seem to pop between sherry, cask finishes, between American oak and virgin oak, and then peaty whiskies. And actually the truth of the matter is they're also different. I don't know why a distillery that's big on sherry finishes wants to then add peatiness to their range, and vice versa. I think stick to what you do and do it really well. Oh, I wish you could smell this as well. You know what you're going to have to do, don't you? You're going to have to go shopping. Oh, that is heading towards a PX sherry. PX, Pedro Jimenez, the sweetest of all the classic sherry styles. And their barrels are the ones which people have just snaffled up in the whiskey industry. You know, you get people like Lagavulin on Islay taking PX barrels to produce their distillers editions, which, you know, are sensational. But that is glorious. And what is amazing about it, 43% again, is that the first sip is totally stitched together. It is a homogenized whole of flavour and is just scrumptious. It's 10 years old and oh, it tastes as though it's an 18-year-old. It's really, really quite something. Just glorious. Now, I've just had a birthday and a great whiskey friend of mine up here, Pat Retson, has a birthday the following day. And Pat, many of you, one person who's watching, who have visited Highland Park in the past may well have had the pleasure of Pat's company because she was their brand heritage manager for many years. And we had the most wonderful whiskey lunch on Saturday in her summer house. And my husband was the designated driver, and he said the mood changed over the course of lunch as we were sipping and tasting and all the rest of it. And we went through a wonderful gamut of whiskies, but this was one of the last ones, and Pat was absolutely besotted with it. So, yeah, an icon of whiskey. You can, if you don't trust me, why are you watching? You should trust her because it is super. Again, $49.95 and just delicious. And that would go surprisingly well with both savoury and sweet. Instantly you think about putting it with fruitcake and all that sort of thing. But with rich lamb casseroles, what other savoury dishes? I'm thinking about terrines and certainly game at Christmas if you are going to have pheasant. There's a wonderful recipe on my website, rosemarymoon.com, for pheasant with lentils and prunes. And that would just be wonderful with it. So if you do like to cook as well as to drink, and I do not understand, it is beyond me, how somebody can be really enthusiastic about drinking and not be into good food. How can that be? And almost vice versa. But yes, absolutely lovely. Fig and pecan pie, you know, oh, so many things. Interesting just to pop back. Oh, this has got a wonderful nose now though after that one, the Glasgow. It's just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, by the way, and it is absolutely my favourite time of the day for tasting whiskey. I wonder what time of day it is that you're watching this. I have no idea, but I hope you're enjoying it. So we've got Lowland, we've got Highland, and we've got Speyside, which of course technically is Highland, but it's a hugely different designated area, and etc., etc. So now we're going to go to Island whiskies. And as we do so, the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that things are a little bit different. Yes, we had a technical malfunction yesterday. Can you imagine? So near to the end of the fourth whisky. So the t-shirt I was wearing yesterday is in the dirty linen. My hair's slightly different. We had to give hair and makeup the day off. But I'm back, and I'm going to talk to you about the fourth whisky, which is Rock Island. Now, Island whiskies, it's all about peat. Or is it? This has got a lovely sweet nose with a dance of peat across the top of it. It's certainly not full in your face. It's not like kind of the south end of Isla, you know, where you've got Lagavie and Lafrague and Ardbeg in kind of 2 or 3 miles up the same road. And that's peatland. No, no, no. This is just a seasoning, which is rather how I like it these days. So we're talking about Rock Island from Douglas Lang. Now, if you wanted 4 single malt whiskies, I'm afraid I'm going to have been a disappointment to you, aren't I? But you've got 3. So please forgive me for having a blend. And this is part of Douglas Lang's remarkable regional malts. And I have to say, I know Scallywag really well. I am such a fan of the original Scallywag with a kind of a greeny label. I'm not so keen on their special editions, and this year's sherried one is, woof, it's just kind of 56% and it's just bang, 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 and it is what it says on the label, strong and a special. You know, I'm such a fan of that, and the Rock Oyster I like as well, but Rock Island, it's new. And I was always a fan of the Six Isles blend, but I haven't been able to get hold of that for a long time. Ian MacLeod Distillers did that. The Wine Society had it, Marks and Spencer's had it for a while, but I've not seen it in ages. So this, unlike Six Isles, this is 4 Isles. This is Arran, Isla, Jura and Orkney. So, it's not really a salty nose. It's sweetness and peat, and that is because this is a sherry edition. So, kind of twinning up with that, and notice, very colour coordinated, purplish label, purplish bands. Really interesting. Do you remember with the Tomatin I was saying, and indeed with the Glasgow, I was saying that all the fruit was at the top and the pepper and spice was at the bottom of my mouth on the first sip? Here is completely different. I've got all the peatiness at the top, but it's really fruity from the sherry cask finish. So again, we've got the kind of the raisins and really rich fruity notes to it. But they're at the bottom, they're the heavier weight in my mouth, if you like. That's where those nuances are. And then the peatiness is at the top. And it's kind of an upside down flavour sensation, if you like. So that was the first taste. The second taste is much more balanced. But then you always expect it to be so. Your mouth is used to the alcohol and what it's delivering to you, and it receives it much better on the second sip. Beautifully balanced, warming peaty pepper at the back, loads of allspice, maybe a touch of cloves, you know, those sort of Christmas spices that we're going to get in our baking. But the sweetness from the sherry cask is really good. I mentioned I'd had a birthday just a couple of days ago, and 2 friends made me 2 chocolate cakes. I love chocolate cake. And this is fantastic, the chocolate cake. Do any of you remember Ailsa Bay in its original formation? I'm sure I must have done a video about it at some stage, but it was one of those whiskies that, you know, like the traditional Islas, that was just wow, you know, sort of knock your block off type peatiness. And I've used it in tastings, and people have come in and nosed the whiskies, naughty people, before they're ready to go, and they've all gone, oh, no way. And yet give them a bit of chocolate brownie or something like that to go with a really peaty whiskey like that. And it's just sensational. And I have to say, this Rock Island, although it's not in the same voraciously peaty style as those or the traditional Islays. It just went with the chocolate cake beautifully. I don't know if I'm imagining it, or perhaps I've walked the dog on the beach too many times today, but I feel that there is a touch of salt in that now developing. It's 46.8%. So again, the high ABV alcohol is contributing to that big flavour. Obviously no age statement on it as a blend. Incredibly warming. You know, if you've been out for a good walk wherever you live, and we live right on the beach, so certainly over the Christmas and winter period, you know, you come home really chilled, this is a great whiskey to reach for. And it is so interesting. I often say challenging about whiskies. This isn't challenging, it's just inviting. Because the peatiness and the fruit is so well blended. And for years I've been on about now, having gone off the heavier peatiness in whiskies, that I love my peat to be just a seasoning. And this really, really achieves it. I've added just a drop of water. Oh, and it just brings out so much more sweetness and fruit in the whiskey, and perhaps it knocks the peatiness back even further. But it's a cracking whiskey, and with these other three, the Glasgow, the Tomatin and the Milton Duff, it just makes a fabulous, you know, this is a great evening with friends. Obviously, I know depending on where you live and how your COVID restrictions are going to affect you in your entertaining this Christmas, but you know, whether it's with friends or quite honestly, whether you're just going to put another log on the fire and just enjoy the four of them yourself, they just give you this whole gamut of the richness and tapestry of flavours that makes whiskey drinking so very, very exciting. So, as I said, this was £49 for 50 centilitres, so it makes it the most expensive whiskey on the table. These two were £49.95. This is actually the cheapest whiskey at £46. All of them, perhaps they're more than you usually pay for your whiskey, I don't know, but maybe you're, you know, drinking things which are more expensive. But then you get to the question, don't you? How much are my friends worth in the way of my whiskey? Am I going to really share my top drawer stuff with them or not? And I think any level of whiskey drinker would be thrilled to taste these. I must just tell you a funny story. My friend Pat, who I mentioned before, from Highland Park, she's very hard of hearing, and she was entertaining some clients one day, and one of them asked for a Milton Duff, and you can imagine when you work for a distillery you tend to be very focused on their drinks, so she thought it was some sort of whiskey cocktail and asked for a melting duck, and or it might have been dove, melting dove perhaps, and of course the bartender smiled at her and said, I think you mean a Milton Duff. And we had a good old laugh about that when we were tasting that together. So I could waffle on. You've probably got better things to do. You probably just want me to go away. There's no prizes for mentioning, noticing the differences on the table behind, because this is one day later than the rest of the video. But I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I've shown you something different that you could have on your sideboard or in your whiskey cupboard for this festive season. I purchased all of these from the Good Spirits Company in Glasgow, a small independent a small independent seller, specialist whiskey shop. They deliver throughout the UK, and of course there are all the online delivery companies as well. But if you have a good bottle shop in your neighbourhood, please go and ask there first. Because everyone's had a really tough year. But that said, I'm going to be back, and I've got another 2 videos planned to share with you. One is on an absolute treat of a drink that Mr. Moon brought me for my birthday, and which has a price tag that I wouldn't spend on myself. So I'm excited to share that with you. And also I want to look at some of the other spirits which are being produced here in Orkney, with another that a cousin has sent me and I'm keen to share with you. So keep having a look at the YouTube channel, because I will be back, and I have loved being with you for these few minutes. Goodbye and God bless, and keep drinking the drams. Bye for now. Now, the trouble with it having gone wrong yesterday is I've only got this one to finish. I had to finish 4 yesterday, which is, I guess, why I didn't do the whole video again.